Food a nightmare for your stomach. Forget the lavish feast with giant turkey legs you see in movies. For most medieval folks, meals were dull, grim, and often dangerous. Peasants survived on pottage, a watery slop of whatever vegetables they could scrape together, stewed in the same pot for days. It was like your mom's mystery soup, but instead of sneaky carrots, it hid weevils and dirt. Bread was the staple, but not the soft, sliced kind we love. Medieval bread was heavy, dark, and packed with unwanted surprises. Flour was ground between stone wheels, leaving grit in the dough. People chewed through what was basically rock-laced bread. Worse, rye flour often carried ergot, a fungus, causing hallucinations, burning pain, or even death. Some historians link ergot poisoning to witch hunt frenzies, where entire towns lost their minds because the baker didn't clean his tools. Meat was a rare treat. When available, it was often half-rotten. No refrigeration meant decay was inevitable. Spices masked the stench, but only if you could afford them. Otherwise, you just choked it down. The 5-second rule was more like a 5-day rule. Water, forget it. Most sources were tainted with human waste or worse. Instead, everyone, including kids, drank ale, a weak, safer brew, thanks to the fermentation process killing germs. Studies suggest the average peasant downed 8 pints of ale daily. Kids as young as 5 drank ale with every meal. Medieval toddlers didn't need juice boxes, they needed fake IDs for water. Fish was common, but usually dried or salted, arriving weeks old for inland folks. The smell alone could knock you out. By now, your stomach's probably churning, which leads perfectly to the next medieval horror. Hygiene, a world drowning in stench. After eating that dreadful food, you'd face the next ordeal, relieving yourself. Most used a chamber pot, a simple bowl or bucket under the bed. When full, you'd dump it yourself or wait for collection. We're usually out the window onto the street below, with a shout of Gardy from the French garde l'eau. Watch out for the water. But water meant something far fouler. In some cities, rules banned tossing waste before 10 p.m., yet streets still reeked. In castles, you'd use a garderobe, a stone seat with a hole dropping waist down the wall, sometimes 70 feet at places like Dover Castle. Kings had thrones, but their toilets were drafty holes. Public options were worse. Common privies over rivers were rare and filthy. The grim task of waste collection fell to gong farmers who worked at night, hauling cesspit sludge outside city walls. The stench clung to them, but they earned 4 times a laborer's wage. Toilet paper non-existent. People used leaves, moss their left hand, or if wealthy, scraps of wool or hemp. The Romans had sponge on a stick, rinsed in vinegar, but that wisdom was lost. One whiff of this reality and you'd kiss your modern toilet paper goodbye. Work, a relentless grind. Most people were peasant farmers toiling from dawn to dusk on noble-owned land. A typical day: wake at sunrise, plow. With ox-drawn wooden tools, sow seeds by hand, harvest with crude sickles. During harvest season, they worked 16-hour days in scorching heat, burning over 4,000 calories daily. No gym, needed just survival. Craftsmen fared no better. Blacksmiths choked on forged smoke, risking burns and blindness. Tanners worked with urine and toxic chemicals, their skin yellowed and reeking. Apprenticeships started at age 7, with kids working 6 or 7 days a week for up to 14 years to become journeymen. The poorest took desperate jobs. Link boys lit the way for the rich with torches, pure finders, collected dog feces for tanners. A day's wage, about 1 or 2 pennies, bought barely 2 loaves of bread. Minimum wage didn't exist. The goal was, don't die before the job's done. Medicine when treatment was worse than the disease. Disease was everywhere, and medieval medicine was closer to torture. A simple cold could kill. No one understood germs or infections. Illness was blamed on bad air or imbalanced humors. Blood phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Fever. Time for bloodletting, slashing veins to drain blood. Leeches sucked out bad blood. One text advised using 70 leeches at once. About 30% of kids died before age 5, and life expectancy hovered between 30 and 40 years. The Black Death, mid-14th century, wiped out 50% of Europe. Dental care was a nightmare. No toothbrushes or hygiene knowledge meant rampant decay. Dentists waited for screams loud enough to echo through town, then yanked teeth with pliers. Medicines like mercury were often deadlier than the disease. Hand washing. They wiped hands on filthy clothes like cleaning mud with mud, just as cruel, unfair, and arbitrary. The medieval legal system was a horror show. Laws varied by town. What was fine in one village could land you in a dungeon 5 miles away. No one knew the law until they broke it. Punishments were brutal: steal food to avoid starvation, lose a hand. In England, over 200 crimes carried the death penalty, from cutting a tree in the king's forest to stealing goods worth over 12 pence. Trials were barbaric. Trial by ordeal meant carrying a red-hot iron for 9 feet. If burns healed cleanly in 3 days, you were innocent. Infection almost certain meant guilt. Or trial by water, tied up and thrown in a river. Sink, you're innocent. Float, you're guilty and executed. Either way, you lost. Executions were public spectacles, drawing crowds with food and drinks like a festival. Drawing and quartering, dragged by horses, hanged disemboweled alive, beheaded, and chopped into 4, was for treason. Jails were dark, crowded pits with no food unless family brought it. Nobles dodged this system, hiring fighters for trial by combat or paying blood money to victims' families. The poor had no defense. Justice wasn't blind, it was vicious and biased. Warfare, death lurked everywhere. War was constant. The 100 Years' War, 1337-1453, dragged on for 116 years, meaning most people saw multiple conflicts. Full-plate armor costing as much as a modern sports car was for rich knights only. Common soldiers wore padded cloth, or if lucky, a few metal plates. Swords were for nobles. Peasants used spears, axes, or modified farm tools. The longbow, piercing most armor, was the deadliest weapon, but archers trained from childhood, their skeletons deformed from pulling 200-pound bows. Battles were chaos. At Towton, 1461, 28,000 died in one day, about 1% of England's male population. Many froze in a snowstorm before fighting. Wounds were nearly always fatal due to infection. Worse than battles was what armies did off the field. They looted villages, burned crops, and slaughtered livestock, leaving civilians to starve. Sieges like Paris, 885-886, drove people to eat rats, cats, or each other. Disease killed more than combat, with filthy camps breeding illness. Daily life, a gauntlet of misery. The stench hit first: human waste, rotting food, unwashed bodies, tanning chemicals, and slaughterhouse blood. No garbage collection meant trash piled in streets or rivers. Butchers dumped entrails outside their shops. People carried herb pouches to mask the smell, but it barely helped. Bathing happened a few times a year. Many thought it let disease in. Lice were so common that lice combs were standard tools. Clothes were itchy, rarely washed, and worn to tatters. Most owned 2 or 3 outfits made of rough linen or heavy wool. Shoes offered no protection. Language was a barrier. Middle English from the 1400s sounds alien today. Homes were one-room hovels where families ate, worked, and slept together with no privacy. Entertainment, public executions, animal baiting, or rare traveling storytellers. The feudal system locked 90% of people as peasants with no chance of advancement. Superstition ruled. Witches, demons, and eclipses sparked panic. News-crawled messages took days or months to travel. Life was a relentless test of endurance. Conclusion. Cherish your modern life. One day in the Middle Ages would leave you begging for antibiotics, flush toilets, and human rights. It was a world of stench, disease, and injustice where survival was a daily battle. Romantic notions of knights and maidens, pure fantasy. The reality was a grueling existence few of us could endure. Be grateful for clean water, toilet paper, and a world where no one tosses sewage out the window.